What is up, guys? Pie Muffin here, and we are back with another video. Today, I want to talk about something I've been playing through lately. And those who have caught I think I've done like 2 streams playing the game now. It might have just been 1, actually, so far. But I have been playing through the Trails series, starting with Trails of Cold Steel, and I want to kind of give my thoughts and impressions on the franchise as a whole. As of this point, I have fully completed the first game, Trails of Cold Steel 1, and I am about 35 hours into Trails of Cold Steel 2. And right off the bat, I have to say, I love the games, I love the world building, I love the lore. There really aren't... Now, just to start this off, these are very long games, so if you're someone who likes RPGs, but is not a fan of like 80-hour plus RPGs, then this might not be for you, because each game is very, very long, and it's very, very dialogue heavy. You know, because comparable to like Tales, for example, Tales usually has games between like 40 to 60 hours if you're playing it for the first time, and they can be dialogue heavy, but it's balanced out by the gameplay. I would definitely say that the Trails series, I can't speak for some of the other iterations, I can only speak of what I played so far, but in terms of Cold Steel 1 and Cold Steel 2, I would say it's probably like 65% dialogue, 35% gameplay. I would definitely say that. I think you spend more time learning about the world, learning about the lore, working on bonding events with characters, which I'll get into, than you do actually doing battles, which for me isn't that big of a deal, because I like being immersed into a story like this while still having some gameplay, but I don't need the entire game to be gameplay. Now, I'm going to try to avoid talking about, and you know, I've tried doing this with games before, where I try to avoid talking about, you know, big story spoilers, but I really just want to talk about what I love about this franchise, and maybe a few gripes here and there, but overall, just kind of what really drew me into this from playing the first game. So I'd say probably about a month ago, I bought the first and second game. They were on sale like 2 months ago, but at the time I was still playing, and I actually haven't finished it yet. But I was playing through Tales of Legendia. I think it was right when I finished Tales of Rebirth and I started Tales of Legendia that I bought Cold Steel 1 and 2 because they were on sale on PS4. And I played the first, like, hour, I want to say, of... It may not have even been an hour, because I didn't even get into my first battle yet before I stopped, but I just wanted to kind of see what it was about. You know, I watched the opening, I did the introductory kind of dialogue stuff, and then right before your first... Well, actually, you go through a tutorial phase first before you get to the introductory stuff. It's kind of a weird game where it's like... It starts in the future of the game, and then they're like 6 months earlier type stuff. So I did that. That was about an hour of gameplay before that. And then I went back to Legendia for, you know, 2-3 weeks till I beat the main story for Legendia and I got to the character quest portion. And then I decided to take a break from Legendia to move back into this. And this is where I've pretty much been since. I think... How long has it been since I hopped back in? I don't think it's been a month yet. I think in 3 weeks I finished the first game, and I'm, you know, probably about halfway through the second game. And I'm in love with the characters. There's not a single character that's part of the main cast that I dislike. There was certain times where I felt in the first game that a character was annoying, but once their development started to hit and we got to learn more about the characters, you know, there's no one in the cast that I can say that I hate. So let's talk about the game itself. So it's a turn-based RPG. You have 4 characters on the field. I'll probably have some gameplay or stuff going on in the background while I'm talking about this, so you'll kind of get to see how it kind of plays. It's your typical turn-based RPG, but you can move around. You can move your characters around the map, and if an enemy's too far, for example, it might take you 2 turns to get your character there, that sort of thing. So it's more or less a traditional turn-based RPG, which is very different than Tales, that's for sure. So if you're more into action RPGs, this might not be the game for you. But I do like how the gameplay is. It feels very daunting at first. Because in the tutorial portion, like I said, it starts you at a 6 months later from the beginning of the game sort of thing. So you have a bunch of characters who are like, I don't even remember what level you are in the tutorial, probably like 40 or something. And you have like 50 billion abilities. So at first I was like, wow, this is a lot. This is kind of daunting. So that did kind of put me off a little bit. And I feel like that portion doesn't really need to be in there. But I feel like they probably put that to give the player something to look forward to. You know, this really kind of big world-changing scenario that will make you be like, okay, I want to see how these characters get up to that point. Which is very understandable. And I'd say the tutorial portion probably happens about 75% through the game. I would say it was probably 25% more you play after that tutorial portion. That was another thing I wondered about while I was playing. I was like, is this tutorial portion the very end of the game? Or is this like... And it's not, which was very good. I'd say the big selling point for this franchise is the character interactions. This game, if you've played Persona, you won't be any stranger to kind of like a bond system where the main character can build a relationship with all the other cast members. And depending on those things, you can have certain scenes at certain points of the game. It's the same sort of thing here, but this is also I haven't played too much Persona besides a little bit of Persona 5, so I can't really say what the differences or the likenesses are. But with Trails of Cold Steel, how it kind of works is each bond level you go up with another character, that'll add another kind of ability that these kind of characters can use together. So like the main character, Reen, and one of the supporting characters, or I don't even know if you call it supporting, they're both main characters because they're both part of the main cast. Like for Elliot, for example, he is a caster character. One of his bond skills, if you grow that relationship, is he has a chance to heal Reen when he gets attacked, or any other character that, because you don't just build the bond between, you know, the main character and the other characters. Any character from the main class can have that bond sort of leveled up. So they all have different things. They might help defend, they might help attack, they might help heal if someone gets attacked, that kind of thing. Now, as for the premise of the story, I'm not going to go into super spoilers, but the general premise is you are following the story of a boy named Reen who is basically trying to find himself by going to a military academy. And what's interesting to me, just from me personally, I couldn't really get into Persona 5, but yet I'm really into this franchise. I don't know what it is that's different, because it's the same kind of setup. You know, you're going to a school, and, you know, you're growing along with your classmates, that kind of thing. I don't know, I think there's just something about Persona that was maybe just a little bit too weird for me, which is funny because there's plenty of weird things that happen in this game, or this series, but I don't know. It might have to do with the world building. I feel like, because with Persona games, each game is like locked in its own kind of like storyline, so like it's not like Persona 1 story carries all the way to Persona 5, whereas at least with the Cold Steel games, from 1 to well, the game that's coming out in Japan this year is called Hajimari, which is like a culmination of all the franchises in one. That's basically 5 games where you're going to be following this one same group of characters, for the most part. I mean, there will be additions to characters as the games go on, from what I've seen, but you're basically following the same group of characters. Now, here's where things get a little tricky. In terms of where you should start, this is just going to kind of be, you know, an all-over-the-place kind of video, just talking about everything. So, at first, before I do anything, I was like, okay, so there's 3 Cold Steel games. There's a 4th one coming out in English later this year, which it's still not out yet. It comes out in October. I was like, okay, so I can play the first 4 games and then just wait for the 5th and final one. But then I was informed that you really can't do that, because after Trails of Cold Steel 2, majority of the plot points have to do with things that happened in the other trilogy and the other duology that have happened. There's Trails of the Sky, which has 3 games. And then there's Trails to, I think it's like Trails to Azure or something, that basically has 2 games. And each of those series follow a different set of characters, but just in different parts of this world, and roughly around the same time. This whole series of games, so if you add, so there's 3 Trails of the Sky, Trails to Azure has 2 games, so that's 5. Trails of Cold Steel has 4 games, so that's 9. And then the final 10th game is Hajimari, or I don't know what it's going to be localized in English, but that's what it's called in Japanese. So that's 10 games that are the culmination of everything that happens within them, and most of the things happen within it's like a 6-year time span. So all 10 of these games take place within like 6 years. So after the second Cold Steel game, you're apparently supposed to go, like, let's say you started with Cold Steel. If you didn't start with Cold Steel, you played the previous games because they did come out before Cold Steel, then you're fine. You know everything, you don't have to worry about it. But if Cold Steel were your first games, after the second game, you're supposed to go play the 3 Sky games and then play the 2 games that have to do with the Azure game. I think it's like Trails to Zero and Trails to AO. So yeah, so you apparently have to do that. The unfortunate thing with that is that the Azure game, so Zero and AO, have not been officially localized in English. Like, you can't legally buy it on like a PlayStation 4 or PC or anything. Like for me, for example, I've bought the first 2 Cold Steel games, and I just bought the 3 Trails of the Sky games because they are on sale on Steam right now, so that was a good point to grab those. But after that, I'm pretty much gonna have to, if I don't want to wait for a hopeful, and I think I heard something that the Azure game is getting localized, but that's still gonna take a while. So what I'll probably just end up doing, since I wanna move along as fast as I can, I don't want to wait, 1-2 years to play Trails of Cold Steel 3 and 4. So what I'm probably end up doing is there is a emulated, translated version of those games that I'll probably just end up playing. So it is a very technical it's one of those technical things where you might have to, kind of move around with how you play games. It's not just you could just play them in order. If you haven't started the series yet, just start with Trails. I think Sky was the first one. Just start with that and just go all the way through. Now as for how the game kind of plays out, the games follow more or less, at least for the first 2 games that I've played, follow a generally similar method of how the game kind of plays, but it's a little bit different. So in the first game, and I don't want to give too much away, but in the first game you do a lot of, it's kind of like the daily school life stuff, so you pretty much have a day where you can roam around and talk to other characters. You have a day where you go to a different town and you complete quests and missions while you see the character developments of all the characters you go with. And then you have other times where there's like specific events when you're in special dungeons and stuff like that. So the first game feels a lot more kind of, I don't want to say hand-holdy, but forced, I would say. It's not one of those games where, it's not like a lot of RPGs, like in Tales, for example, where after a certain point you can just visit any town you've been to. In the first Cold Steel game, it's pretty much just, okay, you get to go to this town during this chapter, and then that's it. So, it's definitely one of those games where you're not going to find a lot of freedom in terms of exploration. It's going to be kind of one of those very linear stories where you go to a town, you complete every quest you can complete in that town, and then you move on to the next section of the story. The second game is a little more free, though. I'm not going to explain why, but you do get a lot more freedom, and at a certain point, you do just kind of get to go wherever you want to go. I can't speak about 3 and 4, because I have not gotten there yet, but it'll definitely be interesting to see at that point. Of course, I am a novice when it comes to this franchise, but I am very excited to learn as much as I can. And here's the other thing I want to mention with that. This game, I've already mentioned how lore heavy it is. It hammers a lot of lore at you. So if you're someone who likes to skip text, if you're someone that's like, oh, this scene's not voiced, that's another thing I want to bring up before I get into this point. The company, Nihon Falcom, is the company that makes these games. They are a very small company. They do not have, a lot of people. So their budget is not as crazy as some, like Tales, for example, or like some of these other big Bandai anime games. So you aren't going to be getting fully voiced games. Now, I've seen some stuff where like some of the older games, they've gone back and fully voiced them later. So we could see like a Cold Steel collection pack on like PS5 or something, maybe in like 5-10 years, where everything is fully voiced. But at this current point when games come out, they pretty much just voice what needs to be voiced. So you're gonna have these very jarring situations where you'll have characters talking, but then certain characters won't be talking. And then you'll have scenes where the same character is speaking, and then all of a sudden it's just text. So if that's something that bothers you, then that's also a thing you need to kind of be wary of. As the games have gone on, I've been told that more voice acting has happened, which makes sense, because if a game is successful, you make money from the game, then you can put that money you make into the next game. Plus, the main character for this series is a pretty popular Japanese anyway. I can't speak for English because I've been playing these games in Japanese, but the Japanese voice actor for Rin, the main character, is the same person who voiced Kite in Yu-Gi-Oh! Zexal. And he's done a lot of other pretty big stuff, so he's a pretty big voice actor, and I'm sure he's not essentially cheap. So they probably have to pick and choose where they kind of do stuff like that. But honestly, the non-voice stuff doesn't really bother me because I'm more interested in the lore itself. So if I have to sit here and, read like 10-15 minutes of quiet text, it really doesn't bother me that much. What else is there really to say? I'm really just trying to, go over stuff that I felt. I love that almost every NPC is kind of like, how do I describe this? Every NPC, I wouldn't say every single one, but a lot of the NPCs you'll just talk to, they seem to have their own personality. It's not like a lot of games where it's like, you'll have a town of NPCs where they all pretty much say the same thing. Depending on what current events are happening in the world, or at what point of the story you're at, the NPCs will have this special dialogue about how they're feeling about everything that goes on, which I think is really, really cool. What else? I don't know. It's just, I've really just fallen in love with this franchise. Like I said, the characters are great. The gameplay's fun. I don't think it's anything like crazy. Like, I don't think the gameplay is going to be anything, people are going to be like, oh my god, this is the most innovative thing I've ever seen. It's really not. It's your generic turn-based RPG. I do like that you can switch. If you have like a party of 7 characters, you can only have 4 characters on the field. So if you have a party of 7, I like that you can switch them in at any point. Like if a character's having a turn, but like, let's say you get in a battle with a bunch of enemies that are only going to be weak to magic, but one of the characters you're using is mostly a melee fighter. You can just switch that character out at any point in time, which I think is pretty cool. I'm trying to think that there are a few negatives, I would say, gameplay-wise. There are some mini-games which I'm not super fond of, like the fishing mini-game is really annoying. It's basically a button-mashing thing. It'll switch from, like, you have to slam square as hard as you can, to slamming triangle, just slamming circle. And some of the mini-games just like that aren't really that fun. There are some gameplay mechanics I'm not fond of, like the ape enemies in the it wasn't really as much of an issue in the first game. I didn't notice as much, but it is there. There are certain enemies where they're big enough so if they hit you, it's an immediate stun of that character. And when all your characters, which I guess could be the player's fault in a way, if all your characters are together and they all get hit by that punch, you just can't do anything. You can't heal your characters, you can't switch anyone around. I had a boss fight with one of those ape enemies that it was literally, I was just sitting there until I got KO'd. So little stuff like that I'm not really too fond of, but, you know, these are older games that just got ported to PS4, so some stuff like that probably can't be... I just wish the amount to which you got stunned, it wasn't like an instant time, like every time. But I guess it is what it is. Overall, I think this franchise is great, and I definitely recommend it to anyone who is interested in a very long series. From what I've heard, the third Cold Steel game, it can be like up to 120 hours to beat that game. Apparently that one's really story heavy with a lot of characters. That's another thing to mention. There are a lot of playable characters, so if you're someone that gets overwhelmed with having to equip, you know, 10 plus characters in an RPG, that's something you have to watch out for as well. But I guess it gets even crazier in the future games. Luckily, those characters aren't always in your party at all times. You usually have a max of like 7 characters in a party at once. It really just depends on the mission. They always ask you, they're like, hey, which of these 7 characters do you want to bring with you on this specific mission? And a lot of the time you can, at least in the second game, you can switch them out more freely than the first game. In the first game, they kind of choose for you. For the most part, there are some side missions where you kind of get to choose, but for the most part in the main story, you don't really get too much freedom as to who you're bringing with you on each specific mission. It's kind of pretty much dictated by the story itself. So, I've never really felt overwhelmed with the amount of... besides the tutorial that I mentioned, I haven't really felt overwhelmed. Especially not in the second game, because, like I said, you get to basically choose the 7 or 6 that you bring with you for each specific mission. So that's not too bad there. But I guess the last thing to talk about is the importance of, like, the Bond events. I've already mentioned how it affects, you know, battle gameplay, but there are specific scenes where you can... And I don't know. I feel like some people might find this, like, unnecessary, but I think it's kind of cool to kind of have a favorite character and want to build that bond with that character, kind of like putting yourself in the position of the main character and being like, oh, you know, this is the kind of person that I would have wanted to hang out with if I was growing up in school type thing. It does feel like it's a very immersive franchise, at least for me it is. I'm not sure if anyone else feels that way, but it definitely does for me. Like, when I'm interacting with these characters, it feels like I'm interacting with them, not that I'm playing a character interacting with them. So I think that's pretty fun. And from what I've heard, I guess in the third game, there's, like, romance options. I guess because the main character has probably grown up to a point where that's a thing. I'm not sure if it's in the second game. I haven't gotten that far. I don't want to know, so don't comment below if it is. But I've heard that in the third game, there's definitely some stuff that can happen there. But that's more or less everything to really say about it. I've been all over the place this video, but I just wanted to give my general thoughts on this. Now, the last thing I want to say, if anyone made it to the end of this video, what I'm thinking of doing, because I want to play them all, not all of them myself first, I think what I'll do is I'm going to play everything all the way through Cold Steel 3 on my own. And then what I think I may do, it's all going to depend how fast I get through everything. I think I may play Cold Steel 4 when it launches, because it launches, I think it's at the end of October. So if I'm caught up on all the titles by October, which I should be, you know, that's over 3 months, that's like 4 months away, pretty much exactly. I think I'll either do a stream playthrough or just a regular playthrough of Cold Steel 4 on the channel. And then what I'll do while we're waiting for the 5th and final game, because apparently after a Trails game comes out, it takes the English side about 18 months to localize the game, because like I said, it's very text heavy. So it should be like by like sometime in 2022, the 5th game that's coming out in Japan this year, it actually comes out in 2 months, will probably it will come out like 2 years from now, basically. So I think in that time, I think I'll try to do a playthrough of some replay, all the Cold Steel games. Probably just the Cold Steel games as a playthrough, because playing the other ones is a little more tricky. Because some are on emulators and stuff like that. But definitely the 4 Cold Steel games, I want to at least have a playthrough of each on the channel. So, I don't know if I'm going to leave a poll on this video. I probably will. And then just let me know what you guys think, depending on the amount of... And definitely leave a like, actually, if you want to see that. Because if that's something people want to see, I definitely don't mind doing it. It's just one of those things where if people aren't going to be interested, because obviously my channel is mostly Tales and Sword Art, if there's not going to be enough viewership for that, it'll probably just be something I play on my own or do a stream here and there. But I'll definitely put the work in to do a full playthrough if people want that. So definitely let me know by liking the video, and if I put a poll up there in the top right or wherever it goes, definitely vote on that. But that's gonna be it, guys. That's my overall impressions and thoughts on the Trail series as of so far. Just to kind of recap real quick, love the characters, love the overall gameplay in terms of battling and what you actually do in the overall world. I love the lore. It really goes deep into kind of what's happening everywhere in the world. And there's a lot of, you know, kind of governmental, political issues that you can actually relate to real life, especially now. But that's going to be it. Thank you all for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more if you're new to the channel. I'll see you all next time. Have a wonderful day, everyone.